and ultimately we're going to leave, and they're going to go about doing what they need to do over there, but we need to focus on the terrorism and focus significantly like a laser on that. Maybe I got a little bit off track with it, but if you want to save $100 billion, there's $100 billion.
Would the gentleman yield?
Please.
So I just say to my friend from California, just going back to those, my analogy or my metaphor of a voluntary pay cut, then all of a sudden you're building 2 houses after you just took a voluntary pay cut, being the 2 wars. The good news, but there still is much work to go, is that the war in Iraq, we had 150,000 people there. Under the Obama administration, that's been drawn down to about 50 and is shrinking. We're saving already $100 billion a year there alone. Obviously, you've got to look at Afghanistan and continued drawdown, because that's money that could go towards not increasing the debt, but ultimately reducing the debt. The other thing is that when people are back to work, the best way to shrink the deficit, just in that same analogy I was giving, is to put people back to work. The more people are working, the better off we are. And I mean both, we're in this together. I mean, that's the whole point of this. This country, it says e pluribus unum. We're from many, one. We're in this together. Big guys, those guys making a lot of money, God bless them. The little guys who are working their fannies off, God bless them. We're in this together. And the only way we deal with problems in this nation is when we deal with them together. And this country is a great nation. We will solve these problems. There will always be problems in the future, and we just take them one at a time as they come. We can do this. We will do this. We will have a prosperous future for all of us. But we got some work to do right now. And my plea to my friends on the Republican side of the aisle is don't cut off the nation's nose to spite its face. We can take care of these responsibilities and pay these bills. That's what America does. It pays its bills. We need to do it in a sensible way and not cut out the future and the opportunity that so many Americans get from their education, from the infrastructure that needs to be rebuilt, and from making things here in this country. So with that, I yield back to my friend from California and thank him for letting me speak as part of his
delighted you joined
orders.
us and brought us the Colorado perspective. 2 things immediately on my mind, and I see that our senior colleague from the great state of New York has joined us. I want to call on him in just a second. One of the things that we're focused on in the Democratic caucus is making it in America, rebuilding the manufacturing in America so that America can make it. Manufacturing really matters because this is where the middle class is. This is where the middle class jobs are. When you couple that with the power of the unions to make sure that working men and women, the middle class, get a share of the wealth that's generated when we manufacture things. And so what's going on in the Midwest, in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Ohio and other states is really important in making sure that the wealth that is generated in this nation is available to everyone in this nation, particularly those people that are making things in America once more. Wouldn't we all love to go into a Target store and find on every shelf, made in America? Chinese, okay, fine, you guys are doing okay, but I want those things made in America. 2 pieces of legislation that I've introduced, along with many others that my colleagues have introduced, simply says that if it's our tax money that's being used to support, for example, solar, photovoltaic systems, the wind turbines, the biofuel systems. If it's our tax money that's being used for the production tax credits or to subsidize the solar cells on your house, buy American-made cells. Buy American. That's American dollars. Use that money in America. Similarly, you and I, we're paying 18.5 cents on every gallon of gas to support the traffic, to support the highway construction, buses, trains, light rail systems. Our money should be used to purchase trains and buses and light rail systems that are made in America.
Would the gentleman yield
I
one more
certainly
time?
will, and then I'm going to turn to
And then
Mr. Rangel.
Then I'll turn it over to the gentleman from New York. On that point, you raise a great point. Here we are finally making some real progress on energy efficiency and renewable energy. And we know you've got to have the whole menu of ways to power this country. It's oil and gas, it's going to be carbon-based fuels, it's going to be nuclear, it's going to be renewable energy and energy efficiency. But under my Republican colleagues' plans, we're going to go right back to where we were as we see gasoline starting to go through the roof. So we're always going to be at the whim of importing oil. I mean, I feel like sometimes my friends on the Republican side of the aisle, their mantra is, let's export jobs and import oil. I mean, it's just wrong. It's wrong for this nation. It's wrong for the future, for our future and our kids. And we really have to be focusing on that. This nation needs to come together because we can build that better future together and not just doing some of the, I think, the knee-jerk things that the Republican Party has requested of the Congress. It's bad for America. It goes way too far, and I know we can do better. And with that, I yield to the gentleman from New York.
Mr. Rangel, please join us here.
Well, thank you so much. I was in my office doing a lot of work, and I couldn't figure who you people were talking about. There must have been some foreign enemies of the United States that really was not supporting the things that, as far as I'm concerned, it just makes common sense. It's just a patriotic agenda. It's just something that if America has given us the opportunity to get to where we are and our parents are where they are, then it would just seem to me that we can't afford to talk like Democrats and Republicans. We're talking about America, an America that can be and continue to be a beacon for countries all over the world. You mentioned manufactured, made in the United States. I remember I was on a trade mission in the Caribbean, and there was some difficulty some members had about whether or not we should give preferential trade to these small countries. My contribution was I just walked around everything that was in the places that we were there. The cornflakes came from the United States. The cars came from the lamps came from the United States. The furniture came from the United States. Doing trade with them meant that we were encouraging our base to do what we do best, and that is to make things. And so it just seems to me that when we get a flicker of hope coming out of Detroit, oh my God, Detroit, when I was a kid after World War II, I really thought I was in heaven to see middle-class people with cars and little boats and kids going to college that never dreamed, their parents never dreamed about it. But they were making things, they were making money, they were investing in our future. And now that they're coming back, I cannot see why any police cars, fire cars, commuter cars, anything, how we can say that we ought to go to Detroit first before we go to Tokyo, before we go to Taiwan and all these other countries. And it's a sense in saying that you made an investment in a country that created an atmosphere that makes us all proud. To me, I like fighting Republicans. I mean, it's what the country should be all about. And I've been here for 4 decades. It's been exciting. And people said, well, didn't this happen in 1994? No, we fought then, but we were still friends. We didn't have people putting down our country. We had different ideas how to reach the same objectives. We were concerned about jobs always, but also education, also health care. It's inconceivable how anybody, Republican or Democrat, can cut programs when if you go into an emergency ward in a hospital, they don't ask for your voting card. They don't ask whether you're a Democrat or Republican. If you're laid off and you go home and you have to tell your wife or pull your kids out of school the loss of self-esteem, the loss of the security that you have, the embarrassment that you got to lose your house. Nobody asks, are you a Democrat or Republican? Are you liberal or conservative? And it gets contagious as to what happens in one block when a house is foreclosed. Then it happens in a community. And then it happens to America. And that is what's happening today. It's happening to our country. And so it seems to me that when people have campaigned and said that they want to stop spending, they want to stop borrowing, and they want to raise revenue, they want to balance the budget, that's not Republican, that's American. But where do you ever get the concept that just stopping spending in certain areas, it means that you have savings? I mean, you can cut someone's foot off, but still, you got to have a problem with the rest of the economy. And if indeed the specialists, Republicans or Democrats, the economists can tell you that their H.R. 1 continuing resolution is going to lose 700,000 jobs, how in the world could we not debate that? How in the world can we not discuss that? How cannot a group of Democrats and Republicans say, well, look, we made these campaign promises. They were ridiculous. We really believe we ought to make sensible cutbacks. Let us see how we can cut back without causing more economic problems for our country. Let's see whether or not the environmental problems still are going to continue, whether or not health problems are still going to be there. And my God, education, United States of America. Education has been the key to open the doors for imaginations to capture the entire world. And you don't have to have any bad feelings about other people in other countries. It's just that we're so used to being proud as American. We're so used to saying that if it's made in America, it must be better. And what we're not used to is asking for handouts. What we're not used to is having people to say that they're not going to help us with unemployment insurance when we didn't want that. We wanted employment. And they say, no, they can't even give us assistance while we're waiting for a break. Right here in America, there's so many people that have lost their jobs. And you know, John, those jobs will never be there for them because productivity, technology has closed the opportunity. My God, they have to be retrained, and it reaches a certain age that retraining is not even an option. But for our young people, for them to go to school or for them to continue to believe in their community, their families, and the country, you got to have training and education to find out what the demand's going to be. It won't be the same demand that we had perhaps when I was a kid or my parents was a kid, but they should be great opportunities in the greatest country in the world. And make no mistake about it, we're not broke. We are not broke. And we did not get into this thing in a Democratic way or Republican way. People made big mistakes. And it wasn't the guy working on the job or the guy in the union that made the mistake. It wasn't that we overcompensated public employees. They didn't cause this deficit. But it just seems to me, John, that we shouldn't have to have this debate on this floor. People listening ought to recognize that just saying you're just cutting billions of dollars of resources and you got to cause pain to our young people, to our senior citizen, is a campaign promise that shouldn't have been made and certainly shouldn't be carried through.
If the gentleman would yield, first, thank you so very much for joining us and bringing a perspective of 4 decades of extraordinary work here on the floor and in the committees, and keeping us on track, keeping that vision that America is a great place, and Americans are strong and resilient and really want to improve their position and even more so want to improve their children's position. And therefore, the key investments that we must make for today and on into the future are pretty straightforward. We need to have the best education in the world. We got a long way to go. We're not going to get there by eliminating Head Start, eliminating the Pell Grants, forcing kids out of school, shutting down classes, taking classes from 20 to 35 kids. That's what my daughter faces. She's a second-grade teacher. She now has 33 kids in her class, probably have 35 in a couple of months. She had 20 last year. We can't improve the education system. Research, that's tomorrow. Research is tomorrow. And if we don't do it today, we will lose this already. I'm getting companies coming to me and said, we have to improve the research. We have to have that research tax credit, because what's happening is the manufacturing isn't in America. It's overseas, and now the research is following the manufacturing. We've got to turn that around, and yet the continuing resolution cuts research. Energy research, research in manufacturing, research in healthcare. So where's tomorrow? Tomorrow's going to be overseas unless we return it to America with smart investments in the future. Infrastructure, transportation, moving people here and there, information infrastructure. The continuing resolution cuts infrastructure. Those are today jobs that give us the future. You can go on and on here. We're nearly out of time. And what I would ask my Republican colleagues is put the feeding frenzy aside. Sit down and look at what really can be cut without harming the future. We can do this. We can make it once again in America if we use our tax policy wisely, use our tax money to support American-made products, buses, trains, solar cells, wind turbines. Our tax money should be used to buy those pieces of equipment that are made in America.
But
There's so much. I would love to yield to you any time.
Just on what you were talking about, the tax policy, to believe that the top 1% of the wage earners or the income people in this country own 40% of the nation's wealth, that the President of the United States has to go to the United States Chamber of Commerce and to remind them of the hundreds of billions of dollars that taxpayers had given to them so that they would be able to survive, and that they won't take a gamble with their country in terms of helping us in partnerships to create the jobs that we need so badly. If we cleaned up the tax code, we can find so much that we can reduce the rates and make certain the incentives we have would be to encourage people to invest in the good USA. So let me thank you so much for the contribution you're making. To me, anyone watching this ought to throw away Republican and Democrats' ideas and to try to find out what's good for our great country.
Well, this is a great country, and we're going to have a great future. We're in tough times right now, and we've been in tough times in the past. But if we have wise, thoughtful policies, we'll pull this country together. We'll deal with the deficit. We just can't do it in ways that are not wise, that do not give us the investments for the future. I think our time has expired. Thank you so very much for joining us. Thank you for your years of service to this nation as a member of Congress and as a war hero. We thank you.
Thank you for your
We
great
yield back,
contribution.
Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman's time has expired. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 5th, 2011, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Carter, is recognized for 60 minutes as a designee of the Majority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate being recognized. Mr. Speaker, in 1994, when the Republicans were placed in control of the House and Senate, they produced a magnificent piece of legislation, a legislative weapon against the overreaching of government. This was done in the Clinton administration and was signed into law by that president. This weapon hasn't been used but once during the Clinton administration and not at all during the GOP years of President Bush. But what it's called is the Congressional Review Act. This is an act that requires all federal agencies to submit any new major regulation to the United States Congress for 60 legislative days prior to its enactment, during which time the Congress can vote to block these new rules that the Congress sees fit. With Mr. Obama in the White House and Senator Reid still throttling back in the Senate, the Congressional Review Act gives the House the potential to block at least expose the outrageous new rules being promulgated on the American people, these are done by the entrenched leftists in the federal bureaucracy, and they are controversial rules that cost Americans jobs. You know, if there's one thing that the American people have told us that they are most interested in, besides the fact that we are running away with spending in this in this Congress, is that they want jobs. You know, you can do whatever you want to a family, but if you give a family a job, that family has at least the security of that employment. And these regulations that have the potential to, rather than create jobs, to destroy jobs, by that very destructive nature, they should be seriously looked at by this House of Representatives. One of the things that people don't understand about how the federal government works is, and in fact, we have this said to us all the time, you pass X law and it is really affecting my business, it's really hurting my business. When in reality, we may have passed, the law itself may not have any harm to their business at all. But the regulations promulgated by the authority given rulemaking power on that legislation, those regulations have the effect of law, and yet they are not passed by this Congress. They are passed by the various agencies and bureau of the country when the Congress gives them regulatory authority. Now you may ask, if you really don't know what's going on here, how important is that? Well, let's just take a look at last year. Last year, the federal government issued a total of 3,316 new rules and regulations, an average of 13 new rules a day. 78 of those new rules last year were major rules. The definition of a major rule is a rule that may result in an annual effect on the economy of $100 million or more, a major increase in the cost of prices or cost to the consumer, and significant effects on the economy, including employment. The Obamacare bill, which was passed by this Congress in the last session of Congress, the health care bill, it's arguably is the mother of all rules creators. The Congressional Research Service reports that Obamacare gives federal agencies substantial responsibility and authority to fill in the details of that bill and of that legislation with subsequent regulations. There are more than 40 provisions in the health care bill that is called the overhaul bill that requires, permits, or contemplates federal rulemaking authority just in that one act of Congress. 40 different agencies can create rules that affect the health care of every American citizen. This House can fight back on those rules with this Congressional Review Act. Now, what is the Congressional Review Act? As I said, they file this with the Congress. And then for 60 legislative days, and legislative days has a definition. A legislative day is a day that this Congress is available to act. So if the Congress recesses for 3 days, those 3 days are not counted in the number of days. So it's not 60 calendar days, it's 60 legislative days. For instance, if you look at the last Congress, rules that were filed last summer, last June, in fact, which would be more than 6 months from the 1st of January, those rules are still available for review. Now, how is that possible? Well, between 1st of June and the end of the year, this legislative body was not in a legislative day 60 days. We had the longest recess in probably the history of the Republic that took place in August because of the political world that the majority saw itself in, and the fact that they felt like they needed to be 6 weeks back home to do the politics. So the majority gave us a long recess. We had a break on the 4th of July. Then we came back for 2 weeks. Then we went back home for campaigning, and then we came back after campaigning in December for 2 weeks. So in total, we didn't reach 60 calendar days, legislative days. Now but all that counting starts over with a new Congress. Something that most Americans don't know is every time we have a new Congress, everything new starts over. So when we write rules for 2 years ago that govern this body, we had to write new rules for this session of Congress. At the end of this 2-year period, we will write new rules for the next session of Congress. And because we are required, I guess you've heard this, it's a new world every morning. Well, at least for Congress, it's a new world every 2 years. Because the nature of our very existence is we are the people's court. The House of Representatives is the people's house. And the people's house changes depending on who gets elected every 2 years. So now we have started a new 60-day period. The 60-day period, the bills that were filed that would be, or the rules that were filed that would be subject to this Congressional Review Act, those rules were all filed on the 15th day of February. Because that was the first time that both houses were completely in session. And so these things will expire sometime in June. And after that clock is run, then this House can no longer act. So the House has right now, during this period of time, from February to June, to act on a lot of regulations. And then this gives us a chance to make a determination. I want to try to give you some examples. And this is kind of the Congressional Review Act right here. I want to give you some examples of some kind of rules that are available to be dealt with under the Congressional Review Act and will be dealt with under the Congressional Review Act. The FCC has proposed rules that will allow the federal government to act as a gatekeeper and prohibit broadband providers from selectively blocking or slowing web traffic. These new FCC rules will restrict access to the Internet and stall innovation in our country, further damaging the economy and hindering job creation. Most people think the Internet works pretty good right now, but there are those who think the federal government should intervene in the Internet, and the federal government should, and the agency in the executive branch should have a chance to actually regulate and decide how the Internet is going to operate. We can't affect the Internet worldwide, but we can affect the Internet in the United States. And most of us feel that we should not, in fact, be intruding on the Internet. But this is now coming up for disapproval under House H.J. Res. 37. Greg Walden is carrying the ball on this, and that clock expires on the 14th day of June. The NESHAP rule for Portland cement manufacturing. What is Portland cement? Portland cement is that bag of powder that you mix with gravel and so forth to make concrete. That's what Portland cement is. Portland cement is manufactured in the United States and manufactured all over the world. There is a regulation which would require the closing of 18 cement plants in this country, and said and these jobs from these cement plants, as a result of the regulations that are being proposed, would be forced to move to India and China if they wanted to continue to produce Portland cement, because they would not be able to meet the standards that will be established by this rule. The U.S. cement industry today provides more than 15,000 high-wage jobs with an average compensation of $75,000 per year, along with allied industries that account for nearly $27.5 billion of the gross domestic product. A statement made by these concrete people are that there's only one element in the world that is more prevalent in construction than concrete, and that's water. That to realize that the second element most important to construction around the world is the production of cement, the production of concrete, and water is the only one that's more important. It's a pretty amazing amount of concrete that is required in the world. And yet, as a result of this rule, there's a distinct possibility that we would be having to look to about 70% of our concrete manufacture would have to be outside of our country. Now, there's been a lot of criticism of this challenge to this rule, because people are saying, but look, these cement manufacturers put mercury into the air. They don't regulate mercury. I just want to show you something that I think is very interesting when this argument is made. This map, prepared by the Electric Power Research Institute, and remember, these numbers, this is the most and this is the least amount of mercury production on our chart. Now, if you will notice that all of the red and these green and yellows here in there, they're scattered down there, is heavy concentration of mercury in the air. The source of that mercury originates outside the United States. This is not the result of American production of Portland cement. This is the result of foreign production of Portland cement, because nobody regulates those. These are regulated industries already in this country, and nobody regulates those industries outside this country. And because of the prevailing winds from the Far East, more than half of the United States has a major mercury output. And the solution is to write a bill that will force more companies to go overseas. That means more mercury will be in the air, because they'll be sending them to unregulated countries. This is a bill that wasn't thought out. This rule is not thought out well enough. And so we should stop it, and we should sit down and work out a clean air set of regulations that actually work to reduce this mercury production, and in fact bring more people to producing in this country rather than not producing in this country. You know, one of the things I hear every day when I go back to Texas is, when are you going to stop outsourcing our jobs to other countries? And yet we're writing a regulation right now under clean air that is going to outsource thousands of American jobs to other countries. This is something that needs to be thought through. Many times these agencies, because they don't answer to the American public in any form or fashion other than this review, these are things that they need to be sat down, and we need to get their heads on straight. So this new rule, we will try to raise this rule. Now, why would we, how does it work? You'd say to yourself, okay, this is how it works in the House of Representatives. How does it work in the Senate? Well, what makes this a really interesting rule is you first need to know what the rules of procedure are in the Senate. In the Senate, it takes 60 senators to agree to bring anything to a vote in the Senate, which makes it difficult to bring things to a vote when more than half of the senators have to agree just to bring something to a vote. But written into this act, signed by President Clinton into law, is the provision that this particular examination of rulemaking authority only requires 30 senators to agree for a vote. It can be brought to a vote. So when it passes out of the House and goes over to the Senate, it only takes 30 senators to agree to bring this to a vote. If it passes the Senate, then it's sent to the President's desk. And then basically he's got the only vote left, in many cases, to prevent bad regulations. The President told us in the last time he had a press conference that he was going to stop job-killing regulations in this country. And the regulations we are going to be working on are job-killing regulations. And so we're going to give him the opportunity to do that. If he chooses to veto it, so be it. And basically, he had the one vote that could have stopped the job-killing regulation. The Office of National Coordinator for Health Information Technology has promulgated complex and confusing and costly rules establishing what it means for hospitals and physicians to have a certain EHR, whatever that is, and I don't know what that is. If not simplified, the rules will prevent health care providers from receiving incentive payments and increase the cost of EHR installations and limit the innovation in health information technology market. Another rule that's out there is called the Boiler Mac rule. Basically, the Environmental Protection Agency is proposing 4 separate rules that would establish more stringent emission standards on industrial and commercial boilers, process heaters. The broad-reaching proposals could cost manufacturers over $20 billion in compliance costs and place hundreds of thousands of jobs in jeopardy. This needs to be dealt with by the 21st of June. The Florida Numeric Nutrient Water Quality Standards Rule. This is also by the EPA, as I understand it. This rule mandates nutrient standards for Florida lakes, rivers, and streams and estuaries in response to litigation initiated by environmental and special interest groups. The Florida Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services concludes that Florida's agricultural community will lose 14,545 full-time or part-time jobs and $1.148 billion in sales annually if this rule is disapproved. This is why this Congress ought to look at this rule. HHS rule on medical loss ratio requirements under the Patient Protection and Affordability Care Act. This regulation requires all health plans to pay a minimum of 80% of premiums toward health services, larger insurers to pay a minimum of 85%. The industry analysis estimates that as many as 47% of the participants in individual and small group plans, which have higher administrative costs due to the economy of scale, will lose their health insurance if this regulation becomes law. So this one regulation, which comes out of the what we call Obamacare bill, could cause 47% of the people who have small to mid-sized health care plans to lose their health care plan. We actually have a bill that is coming before this Congress. It's, Jeff Davis of Kentucky has introduced this bill. It mandates that all new major rules must be approved by Congress before becoming law. This is pretty simple. It just supplements what we're already dealing with by saying it uses the same definition for major rules and requires Congress to approve all major rules and federal regulations before they become effective. Now, why would we do that? We'll start off with 3,000 plus new regulations were passed last year. And these regulations could cause you or others to lose their jobs. And so that at least if it's our responsibility, and I think it is our responsibility in this House, for us to come up with solutions that make jobs be created rather than make jobs disappear, then those things that have a potential to make jobs disappear, it's part of our responsibility to take a hard look at those regulations that might make jobs disappear. I mean, this is not rocket science. This is pretty easy stuff. You know, we, who are the people's representatives, who are elected to represent the people of the United States, And remember how our founding fathers set up our Constitution. The senators represent states, and the Congress, the House of Representatives, represents people. Our districts are drawn based on the population of those districts. Their district is the whole state, and they represent the state of Texas, or the state of New Jersey, or the state of New York, or the state of California, and all the other states. So we are the direct link to the people. We are the only branch of this House and Senate where no one can sit in these seats and be a member of Congress unless they were elected. That's something a lot of people don't know. A senator, if we should have a senator and, heaven forbid, die while in office, that senator can be temporarily replaced by an appointment by the governor of the state that senator represents. But if we have a member of Congress, heaven forbid, die while in office, that congressman has to be elected before they can serve in the House of Representatives. So we are the people's house. We are the only house that depends upon the vote of the people to keep us here under all circumstances. So if that's how we get here, and our responsibility in today's economy is to try to get ourselves out of the poorhouse with all the borrowing we've been doing, and to help create jobs so Americans can get back to work. If Americans get back to work, we will have a solution in many instances to the problems that face our country right now as far as debt and other things, because if they are working, they are paying taxes, and those taxes will help alleviate the issues we have. So if that's the case, why wouldn't it make just decent common sense that this Congress, the People's House, would have the opportunity to look at regulations that might destroy jobs? And if we have credible people that are saying they will destroy jobs, then we need to look seriously at those regulations. And maybe it's just a matter of killing the job-killing regulation so that we can renegotiate regulations that solve the problem without driving industries overseas or killing the jobs that these industries create. Sometimes agencies are not putting priorities on people, they're putting priorities on other things. And therefore, we need to examine our priorities, because our job on this floor of this House is to make sure of the safety and welfare of our constituents back home, and make sure that we do everything we can to make sure that they got a job so they can support their families and support themselves. And right now, with not 9% anymore, 8.9% unemployment, which is about as close to 9 as you can get without being there, we are still in an unemployment nightmare in this country. I can remember back during the Clinton administration when there were public service announcements made that said 5.5 unemployment was full employment for the United States. We later learned that unemployment got down to, during the early part of the last decade, to a much lower number than that. But we certainly know we cannot continue to tolerate somewhere between the top end of 8 and 10% unemployment and expect our economy to be healthy. We've got to get our people back to work. These regulations are part of the issues that are going to be important to discovering the solutions to this problem. Some would say this is controversial. Some would say that if the Congress interferes with regulatory authority, then Congress is going to take on something that by plan was passed out to the regulatory agencies to keep us from having to work so hard and getting into the weeds on all these bills. I didn't come up here, and I don't think anybody came up here not to work hard. If they did, then they probably don't belong to being up here. And if the actions of a regulatory board or an individual that is in charge of a regulatory agency has a dire effect upon the employment of any American citizen, I think we as the members of this Congress have a duty and a responsibility to at least look at it. If we don't think it's bad, we can vote accordingly. But to just ignore it and let these things be created, and I would argue without a serious due process of law, because the only people that police this up is the various agencies in the executive branch of the government, and it's generally done by career bureaucrats. And they make these decisions. These people don't answer to the American people. They don't go before the American people for a vote every 2 years, and therefore they don't feel that the pressure of the damage that can be done by some of these regulations. Some of these regulations that are going to come before this House are going to be good regulations. And I would expect them to be voted for and upheld. But if we have the responsibility and the duty to protect our fellows, then I think we should step forward and do that job. And my friend from Florida is here. Welcome. I'll use you whatever time you'd like to join me in commenting on this regulatory overreach.
I thank the gentleman from Texas for recognizing me. I didn't plan to speak today, but I was in my office and I was listening to your explanation of this abhorrent and out-of-control administrative rules process where people who are not elected and are not accountable make up the rules as they go along, however they may want them to. We've had a number of cases that has injured my constituents, or at least caused them a lot of sleepless nights already. As you may know, sir, earlier this year, the Securities and Exchange Commission exposed their intent now to examine the entities that they regulate, not just based on their conformance with securities law, but on their environmental stewardship. Now, these are the same people that couldn't put Bernard Madoff away when they were given an open and shut case 10 years before Madoff basically turned himself in. This is the same agency that hasn't disciplined anybody. Nobody's been reprimanded, nobody's had their wrist slapped, and nobody's had a day off yet. They can't do the job they're supposed to do now, but they're going to start regulating companies for their environmental stewardship based on rules that they promulgated, and you're correct, that's the wrong thing to do. Most recently, and near and dear to my heart because it affects so many people in my state, is the new rule the IRS has proposed to deal with banks and foreign deposits. You know, for over 90 years, this country has encouraged foreign investors to put their money in our banks. It makes good sense. We have their money, we can loan it out, it creates jobs for Americans. It's a win-win situation. It's a win for them, it's a win for us. Now the IRS has decided that they're going to promulgate a rule that says the banks must notify the governments of every foreign depositor regarding how much money they have in our banks. Now, what's the benefit to the United States for that? There is no benefit to the United States. They don't owe taxes in the United States. What's the liability to the United States for that? The liability is that $200 to $400 billion will leave American banks and go back into foreign banks. Now, can you imagine if you were unfortunate enough to be governed by Hugo Chavez, Ahmadinejad, or Castro, what would happen if they found out that you had assets in the United States of America? You'd not only lose your assets, you might lose your life. But more importantly, this wrong-headed rule would cause a dramatic stimulus effect on our economy. When you look at a stimulus bill of $800 billion that basically didn't perform like it was supposed to, it doesn't make much sense to write a rule that would take $200 to $400 billion, up to 50% as much as the stimulus bill was, out of our economy. The IRS tried to do this about 10 years ago. Over 100 members of Congress stepped up and said this is a lousy idea and it needs to be defeated. And so my plea today, sir, is that we can have at least 100 members of this Congress that will again stand up and say this is a bad idea 10 years ago, it's a bad idea now, let's kill this rule and don't let it happen. Thank you, sir. I yield back.
I think I'm glad you brought that up. You know, what's really interesting, Mr. Posey, is that they've got this new rule. I'm not sure who promulgated it, that if you're a volunteer on a commission or a board that has anything, that any form or fashion handles money, you have to pay a $600 licensing fee to get a license to serve on the volunteer board. You know, the one that comes to mind is in every city of any size has what's called a planning and zoning commission. I happen to serve as the chairman of that commission in my hometown of Round Rock, Texas. It's a hard job. It's in many ways a thankless job. But now, in order for a volunteer to come in and serve, to decide how the city is going to plan and zone its area for various construction and business, you got to pay a fee to volunteer, $600 bucks. But that's not how ridiculous it is. Any board, agency, or commission, and every state has literally thousands of these volunteer positions that people do to help out their state, their city, their county. If there is any form or fashion of bonding capacity for any relative group that you serve, you have to buy a license for $600 bucks because you are considered to be in the investment business. I'll yield back to Mr. Posey.
I thank the gentleman again. You know, many people, even elected people, aren't really familiar with what exactly an administrative rule is. You know, we talk about these administrative rules as rules, and people wonder what they are. And I used to explain to people that in Florida, where I first got interested in the administrative rule process, all the laws on the books passed by their elected state officials were in 4 law books this big. They were shocked by that. They said, well, what about the commercials where we see the attorney in front of all the books advertising for Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe? I mean, what are all those? Aren't those laws in our state? I said, yeah, that's last year's edition and the edition before that and the interpretations of them, but all those rules are in those 4 books. And they're shocked at that. And they say, well, we thought there were a lot more laws than that. And I'd say, well, there are more laws than that. But those are all the laws that were made by people you elect. The administrative rules are laws which are made by unelected people that you don't vote for. And usually they could fill up half the room. They'd probably fill out a quarter of this room. So that's what most people don't understand. The relatively few laws that are passed by people they elect and the plethora of rules that are passed by people they don't elect. I remember it's one of the reasons I ran for the state legislature. I had promised my wife when I got off the city council I'd never run for office again as long as I live. She made me promise her. That changed, and one of the reasons was I was upset about the runaway proliferation of rules in that state. It seems like they were making rules willy-nilly that were causing an inconvenience for every business and putting jobs in danger. So I got elected, and Judge, you know, the first bill I passed made it a third-degree misdemeanor for a bureaucrat to promulgate a rule that wasn't authorized by statute. Of course, people thought I was crazy. A lot of the media made fun of me, and I was the brunt of a lot of jokes. The governor at the time had a hit squad go after that bill, and when I had it come up in committee, they went around and met every member and said, kill this bill, but it still got out of committee. So they referred it to 6 more committees, and we weren't able to advance that. And I struggled with trying to change the way the administrative laws were promulgated and come up with a system. For about 4 years to no avail. Representative Semler, Representative Pruitt were doing the same thing, and it just seemed like we were getting nowhere. And then in the 4th year, the governor, that had previously seemed so disgruntled with my legislation, gave his final State of the State address wearing one of these belts like they wear at Walmart or Home Depot or Lowe's so you don't hurt yourself and he was holding all the rules that applied to a cook shack that he wanted to build on Chamonix Plantation. And he said, we have got to do something about this out-of-control rules process. And he gave every member of the House and every state senator at the time a copy of a book by Philip Howard called The Death of Common Sense. It's a great book that I implore people to read. Very short, and it's an easy read, and it talks about how the rules processes work to harm society. You know, Mother Teresa at one time wanted to have a house for homeless in New York City. She located the perfect spot, got the contractors ready, was ready to open the doors, but the building department said, no, you can't do that here. I said, why? Because that building does not have enough restrooms. So we have to continue to let the people sleep on the sidewalks and use the street for a restroom because of their rigid, monolithic interpretation of the laws and the rules. And so as a result, finally, of his personal experience, the governor said we need to change the rules procedure, and we did. And you know, we changed the way rules are vetted. There's a Joint Administrative Procedure Committee which reviews every rule to make sure there's specific statutory authority to write that rule. The new process wasn't in order very long before one of the state agencies determined that any land with a new type of fern or fauna on it should be considered a wetland and couldn't be used for any development. Fortunately, it impacted a very large landowner down there who challenged the rule through an administrative court, an administrative rule through an administrative judge. The administrative judge ruled in favor of the bureaucrats, saying the legislature could not possibly have meant exactly what they said. That was the crux of their 38-page decision. So the next year we passed House Bill 107, which basically said we mean unequivocally exactly what we said. And from a rules perspective, the state has lived happily ever after. Now, Washington is more dysfunctional than I anticipated that it would be when I got here. And one of the worst dysfunctions is the administrative procedures or the administrative rules process here. It's shocking that it's a very old process built on a flimsy foundation. There have been numerous attempts to fix it. None of them have been really successful. And I think, as you and I have discussed before, we need to have total reform. We need to start with a clean sheet of paper, and we need to make the agencies accountable for the rules they write, and they need to be specifically statutorily authorized to do those things. And so I hope that our colleagues will join with us as we move forward trying to seek an accountability and an efficiency in our government that is greatly lacking right now, but is within our grasp. I yield back, sir.
Recapturing my time, I thank you. You want to speak? Grab a mic. You're Arkansas, right? Mr. Crawford from Arkansas. We're glad you joined us. One of our new members we're proud to have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're talking about the regulatory overreach of the federal government.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity to be heard, Mr. Chairman. Under the Obama administration, the executive branch has hijacked the legislative process. The administration is riddled with unelected officials who are regulating the American people. The FCC, for example, the EPA, dozens of appointed czars have way too much to say. Congress needs to take back the reins on legislation, which is what we were elected to do. Appointed friends of the President, they don't know what the people need. That's why we have Congress. We were elected to know our districts and represent our district's needs. That's why I know how detrimental the EPA's regulations are to farmers, for example. Time and again, the EPA has produced regulations that go way beyond the intent of the federal law. For instance, the Clean Air Act was intended to keep our air safe and clean, but the EPA has turned it into something it's not, a means to regulate dust. Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, I have actually risen in support of legislation to not fund their ability to regulate dust, and here I am again talking about this very same thing. I represent a heavily agricultural district in the great state of Arkansas. Any of the farmers in the 1st District will tell you this: food comes from the ground, and in the process of taking it out of the ground, we're going to stir up some dust. And now the EPA wants to regulate that dust. It's a natural byproduct of growing and harvesting crops and has been since man first put seeds in the ground. In order for these farmers to do their job and feed the millions of hungry mouths in our country, they should be allowed to do their job without being further poked and prodded by EPA bureaucrats. Under the new National Ambient Air Quality Standards, the total estimated cost to industry lies near $90 billion per year. A huge portion of this will be a direct hit to our farmers, putting many permanently out of business. Mr. Chairman, I'm certain that the Clean Air Act was not legislated to put farmers out of business. Another example of unelected officials missing the mark is EPA's fuel containment regulations. Once again, the EPA overstepping its bounds. They want to tell farmers how best to run their farms. Not only does EPA not trust farmers to run their operations well, the parameters they set for fuel containment end up costing the farmers tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the size of their farms. What the EPA needs to remember and understand is that farmers are smart people. It's in the best interest of them to invest in containment berms to ensure the land remains productive. Farmers don't want to spend money to clean up a fuel spill, which is why they already take the necessary safety measures. They shouldn't be forced to spend $10,000 for each containment facility when $1,000 would do the trick. Farmers know best how to protect their own land. We can't forget to protect the farmers. Folks, if we eat, we're involved in agriculture. There are over 300 million people to feed in America and only 1 million farmers. In fact, out of that 1 million farmers, 250,000 account for 80% of the total food production. Now, I know here in Washington we can barely agree on anything, but I think there's one thing we can agree on, regardless of our political affiliation, age, race, or gender, and that is we like to eat. So why are we harming the people who feed us? We need to bring common sense back to Washington, quit letting the bureaucrats in Washington run a rice farm in northeast Arkansas, and let them do their jobs. The Clean Air Act and fuel containment are two solid reasons why the Congressional Relief Act is necessary, and I proudly stand with my colleagues in this effort to scale back rogue agencies such as the EPA in order to restore congressional intent to the regulations that are being produced. No longer should we let the tail wag the dog. And yield back, Mr. Chairman.
I thank you for your comment, and I